Most financial advice tells you what to do. This podcast explores how to do it when life, stress, fear, shame, and overwhelm get in the way. Welcome back to Unfuck Your Money, the podcast where overwhelmed, high achievers, overgivers, and anxious humans learn how to create a calmer, more empowered relationship with money, themselves, and with life. I'm your host, Nadz, behavioral finance coach and somatic practitioner, founder of Save a Million Cents, where I help people understand the behavior behind their money so they can finally bridge the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Over the past several years, I've helped clients pay off debt, reduce financial anxiety, understand their financial trauma, build savings, increase income, stop emotional spending, and create more financial stability, not by teaching them how to budget harder, but by helping them understand the emotional, behavioral, and nervous system patterns that drive their financial decisions. Because here's what most financial advice gets wrong. It tells you what to do, but it rarely explains why it's so hard to do it. And that's where this podcast comes in. Here we explore the intersection of money, behavior, nervous system, self-trust, emotional well-being, and the very human reasons we struggle to follow through on what we already know would help. Because when you strip away the spreadsheets, so much of our financial behavior is about emotional regulation, attachment, safety, identity, and habit loops, and not maths. Which is why my clients can recite every personal finance book ever written and still struggle before working with me. So if you're tired of hustle culture, shame-based financial advice, and wondering why doing the right thing with money feels so much harder than it should, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm very excited for my guest today. Felina Danalis is back with us on the show. Felina, welcome back. Tell us what you've been up to. I'll be linking our first episode in the show notes because it was the best money conversation in the world, like I titled it. But yeah, welcome back. And what have you been up to? What have you been doing?
Thank you so much, Nadine. It's such a delight to be back with you. And I just want to say thank you for coming back into this podcast space. And thank you for talking about the topics that you're talking about. You know, it's really, really meaningful to have these opportunities for people to learn about money and the nervous system and how we can up level those relationships. And your voice is really, really valuable. So I'm really, really glad. I know the last year and a half has been bumpy, and I'm so glad you've decided to opt back in to create more spaces for people to have these meaningful conversations.
Thank you for saying that. It was really, really bumpy. And I had moments of like, what am I doing this for? What am I, blah, blah, blah. Because it kind of, being in an online business burns you out. In any business, anything can burn you out if you overdo it. And being an overachiever from an Arab background, I have the tendencies to do it.
Yep, plus one to that.
Yep. Yeah. So I've been, following you online, and I know that you opened an in-person practice. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's lots of things have changed over the last couple of years. I'll just kind of give people kind of some of the highlights. What I was noticing in my own nervous system, I live in Palm Springs, California, which is just a lovely, lovely community. It's a lovely place to be,
Mhm.
and it's incredibly safe. It's beautiful. I live next to a mountain. There's an enormous amount of abundance here. And this is one of the places in the world that people come to on vacation. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of different spots in the world where people go when they're burnt out. And Palm Springs is one of them. And what I was kind of sensing and feeling in my own system was like, I want when people to go on vacation to also have opportunities to have more meaningful experiences.
Nice. Yeah.
And so people come here, they go to the tennis, they play golf, they go to the hot springs, they do lots of different things related to wellness. But I didn't want to just see people coming here to feel better by just resting. I wanted them to be able to get better. And
Mhm.
so I introduced Palm Springs Somatics as an in-person opportunity for people to just like you would go to, let's say
A
I'm visiting
massage.
Albuquerque and I want to go get a massage.
Yeah.
I can look at a different, menu of massage options. And so I'm really offering an in-person somatic practice so that people can try it. People who have heard of somatics, but they've never had been in a place where they've had an opportunity to try,
Hmm.
or they've never been on vacation and, had some spaciousness, or just to be in that field of curiosity of like, oh, I've heard about this. Can I try something that will move me from just feeling better to actually getting better? And
Wow.
yeah, so that was kind of the genesis part of it. And part of it was too, like after COVID, so many people in the helping professions, so many coaches, so many therapists, so many somatic practitioners did not go back to in-person
Yeah.
practices. And
Hmm.
I really, really wanted to be able to offer that as well. For so many folks, that is an incredibly important part of being able to work with somebody in person. And there are not a lot of people doing it anymore in my community. And so I
Hmm.
really wanted to be able to offer that in-person nervous system regulation so that people can feel what is it like. And then they can continue the work online, which is really great.
So honestly, earlier when we started recording, you mentioned, that I came back into the podcasting world. There were a lot of questions in my life after, a serious illness. I questioned everything, and one of these things was like, do I go back to SE training? Because I was a little bit more than halfway through. And I kept it as an open question for myself. But when you opened your practice, it gave me a gut reaction of, yes, I want to continue. And I, continued. So it's really funny and cool that we do things and we don't really know how it has this ripple effect on people that don't even say anything. Because honestly, like that was my catalyst to go back also to SE. And then going back to SE made me want to talk about what I'm learning and what I'm curious about. And I returned to the podcast. So there you go. Never underestimate your decisions.
I will just tell you, my whole body just lit up hearing you say that. And here's what's so meaningful, hearing the impact dominant culture and our own trauma tell us like we're alone and we're isolated, right? And that it takes so much effort to get out into the world. And yet we are in a lineage of people who have been supporting us, right? There are
Yeah.
those who've come before us. And today's a really meaningful opportunity. Our community lost an elder and somebody who's
Mhm.
very, very important to me. And I would just like to name her.
Yeah, of course.
Somatic Experiencing International is the organization that teaches people the method that Peter Levine offered, which is about healing trauma in the nervous system. And um, you know, I think more than 40,000 practitioners have been trained in that methodology for people who don't know what SE is.
Hmm.
And Efu Niaki was a teacher and a mentor and a colleague. And, she was an incredibly bright light in the world. And when I heard of her, and I'm still processing,
Yeah.
I'm still processing that loss. But as a Black woman from Tanzania, she living in Brazil, she brought a really beautiful intersectional, really inclusive lens to the healing of trauma in a way that I had never experienced in my own life. And
Hmm.
when I heard the news and was devastated, and we're still, recovering as a community, and I don't know if that loss we'll ever recover from, but the two pieces of information that I got downloaded from her so loudly were number one, you belong. Number two, share what you know.
Yeah.
And number three, dance. Dance,
Mm.
dance, dance, dance like a motherfucker. She was, Efu was the most joyful person I knew, and she was always dancing. And she was dealing with some of the most horrific trauma I had ever seen and was helping people heal from that. But because she was always dancing and because she was always sharing and because she knew that she belonged, her presence just radiated so much magnanimity. And so I carry Efu in my heart today. And I
Mm.
just wanted to share that with this community.
Yeah, when you asked me earlier who would I like to do my advanced with, I mean, she was my number one option, but I heard of her passing over the weekend, and it's really sad, but she will stay alive in our hearts and within the community. And I love what you said, you belong. And it's one of the hardest things for me being like you, just a full-time immigrant. Belonging feels really hard. I mean, I laugh because I'm nervous, but even going back and spending time in Jordan, where I was born and raised, it
Yeah.
felt like I didn't belong. And the dancing bit that was taken away from me for so many months, and I didn't know if I were gonna regain the ability to. And thankfully, I have. And like I was sharing with you, like after losing function, suddenly I can't. I have difficulty trusting my body again. So I can dance, but like I don't enjoy anything my body does anymore because I've lost my trust in it. And that's something that I plan on working on in 2 days with an SE, a somatic experiencing practitioner, as part of the program. So yeah,
Could I offer something for
please. Yeah.
you and for anybody who's listening and who might be in a place of in a place of pain is the word that comes to mind is yet. Right? You
Yet.
don't
Yeah.
trust your body again yet,
Yeah.
right? You can't get your full footing yet. And I feel like that's so important and meaningful because it reminds us like we don't have to do all of the things today, right? Dominant culture, capitalism tells
Mhm.
us we have to do everything today. We have to do everything today. We have to make all the money today. We have to do all the healing. We have to heal all the generations behind us
Yes,
and all the
today.
future, we have to, we have to do all the things, and the way I think about it is you don't have that capacity yet, and you're
Yes.
speaking it into being, right? As part of this work is like we get to speak into being what we do want and what we do
Mhm.
long for. And so that yet piece feels really important.
Yes, yes. I get, yeah, I like the word yet because it gives me and my body hope. Like I feel it when you said yet. I felt it in my body because I am yet to uh, enjoy a meal. Like I eat, but I don't taste. I move, but I don't enjoy. Um there's like a big disconnection that happened. But yeah. Um I mean, we could just do it 4-hour episodes. What do you think, Felina? Let's just do
You know what? I have a
that.
dentist appointment after this, so I kind of like that idea. But
Cancel
but the
it.
truth is, I love my dentist, and he's amazing.
We
So,
do one
but
of these like
otherwise, I'm
reality
tempted.
show reality show things like peer pressure. Cancel it. Cancel it. So, we're here to talk about money and somatic experiencing. And when it comes to money, I would say that the majority of people think about financial literacy, budgeting, money mindset, but very few, unless they have worked with you or me or listened to this podcast for a while, very few understand what actually happens in the body around money and how and what actually like and that what actually drives our financial decisions and our financial behaviors is actually more body based than it is cognitive. So our behavior is really driven by what's stored in the body. So let's just start baby steps. For people who have never heard of somatic experiencing, what is it? And how is it different to, let's say, talk therapy or kinesiology or any of these things?
Yeah, I love that question. So, there are many ways of describing somatic experiencing, which is really about how we are being. So it is a neurobiological approach
Mhm.
to being present and to healing trauma, right? So I mentioned both of those because we are in a crisis, in a moment where we're in a crisis in our society where folks cannot be present. Right now, there's somebody listening to the podcast and who is like wondering, should I listen to this podcast or should I listen to the other podcast that I was scrolling through, right? Like
Hmm.
because there's such a difficulty with being present in our times, right? Like
Hmm.
that's I just want to name that. So like
Definitely.
if you're that person listening, like we see you, we're here with you. So somatic experiencing helps us to be present with what is, and at the same time, it can also help us with healing the residue of survival physiology that's still in our nervous system from past experiences
Hmm.
that may be driving our behavior in ways that seem kind of irrational or not what we would like to see them doing. So that's kind of the two main axes that I think of somatic experiencing is helping us to be present and expand our capacity for pleasure in the present moment, as well as giving us some tools and strategies for regulating the nervous system by healing trauma.
Yeah, beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. And, we've always heard trauma lives in the body. What does that actually mean from a neurophysiological or biological standpoint of SE?
Yeah. It's a great question, and we haven't actually always known that. I want to
Hmm.
like peel back the layers, right, for some younger folks, right? Maybe from, for some younger folks, like if you've just started getting interested in the nervous system and trauma, in the last couple of years, yes, everybody is talking about how the trauma is stored in the body, but pretty much up until about 30 years ago there was this there was this idea that traumatic incidents were living in our heads, like we were
Hmm.
people who were living in our heads, and that it was a thing you could get over by thinking about it differently.
Hmm.
And so really when you look at kind of the history of this work, it's actually a relatively more recent phenomena in the West. Keep in mind, I'm saying
In
the
the West,
West.
yeah.
In the West, not in indigenous cultures, but in the West, it's a relatively recent phenomena. Keep in mind that when Freud started looking at psychology in the 19th century and that so much of that work was about really separating from the mind from the body, right? Like that
Hmm.
was a lot of that work that was kind of living on in this very European Descartesian mentality of I think, therefore I am. So for many, many generations in the West, people were cut off from this knowing that the body keeps the score, to use a commonly used term by Bessel
Hmm.
van der Kolk. So having said that, I will now address your question because
Okay,
I
yeah.
feel it's important for younger folks to have a sense of kind of the history of where we're coming from.
Yeah,
So when we say that trauma lives in the body, what we're saying is you can't outthink it.
definitely. Yeah.
Right. So that means, for example, say you put together your budget and you're like, okay, this month I'm going to spend, I don't know, $400 on food. And then you come home from work, you're exhausted, you've had a conflict with a coworker, they've asked you to transition to yet another, technology system. You're overwhelmed and you just get online and you order, DoorDash and you spend $50 on food right there, even though you said you weren't going to,
Yeah.
because your nervous system, which is where trauma lives, is responding to a need to calm itself down. And by spending the money, you get dopamine, right?
Hmm.
And getting that yummy meal, right? You might also get more dopamine. You definitely get more dopamine.
And you get
So it,
rest.
and you get rest, right? You don't have to clean the kitchen, you don't have to go grocery shopping. And so when we talk about trauma living in the body, that's really what we're talking about. You
Mhm.
cannot outthink, you cannot outbudget your nervous system.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. You really cannot out budget your nervous system. So, throughout my years of practice, I have worked with, let's call them high achievers or overachievers, overgivers, and a lot of people in the finance industry, like yeah, a lot of accountants, a lot of that. They understand cognitively what they should be doing intellectually. They know it, but they still struggle with their money behaviors. How can we explain this to people somatically and from a nervous system informed lens? Because I think when I start getting into that conversation, a lot of the shame dissolves, especially when I'm talking high achievers. There's nothing that they can't achieve. But when it comes to money, it's like their Achilles heel. Is that how you say
Yes, yes,
it?
absolutely.
Yay.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. That's really, really meaningful. I started my career working at the World Bank,
Hmm.
doing international economic development, and so I was always around people who, had doctorates in economics and who knew how to develop financial systems for other people. I wish, there are times that I wish I could go back and talk to those people and peel the layers back, because I know my nervous system was dysregulated then.
Oh yeah.
So I would love to talk to them. But, I recently gave a talk at Cal CPA, and Cal CPA is one of the largest organizations of financial professionals in the world, of over 40,000 people. And
Yes.
I was a keynote speaker at a recent conference that they had, and it was a beautiful opportunity to talk about this kind of bridging the gap between finance and accounting worlds and the healing arts. And as there is more and more movement, as accountants are being moved out of being the ones who are developing financial plans for people, they're being required to upskill, right? So this is bringing the conversation of AI into our work. And
Mhm.
as much as, many of us don't want to talk about AI, it is a part of where we are.
It
So
is.
what's happening is that finance and accounting professionals at the highest levels are recognizing that their cognitive and left brain skills for developing a financial plan, for modeling, are not what's going to get them job security. It's not what's going to move them to the next level in their careers. They need to onboard these softer, what we call softer skills in terms of nervous system regulation, so that they can not only better meet their clients where they are, but that they can help their clients by adding value to them.
Mhm.
Accountants and finance professionals charge a lot of money, right? Like they charge really high fees at times, and they do really, really important and meaningful work.
Yes.
And for people to maintain that quality of life and that standard of living, they need to upskill themselves to learn some of these somatic skills and tools, so that when a client comes to them, they're not just looking at the client's numbers. One of the things that I do in my work, and I'm sure you do as well, and many of us do, is when I'm looking at somebody who is a high net worth individual, or somebody who's running a company, and we're looking at their balance sheet and we're looking at their numbers. I'm not just looking at their numbers. I'm looking at how they're talking about their numbers. I'm
Yes.
looking at how their nervous system is responding when I ask them questions. And that is what I'm tracking and at my tuning to.
Hmm.
And so I feel like this moment that so much of the world, it used to be you got a degree, a college degree, maybe a graduate degree, and you had job security for life. That is no longer the case. That is no longer the
Absolutely.
case. And so for people who are working in the finance or accounting professions, or who are working in the banking industry, or who are working in any sector that can be automated, I think of doing this somatic and work as an investment in your own, not just your own relationship with money, like your own ability to invest properly and to keep a budget and that good stuff, but also job security, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm thinking every time somebody talks, to me, like last week, after giving this talk at Cal CPA, this woman who had been an accountant for 30 years reached out to me, and she said exactly what you're talking about. She's like, I'm really good with handling other people's money. I tell them what they should do with their money, but I've had this anxiety about
Hmm.
about money, and your approach when you spoke, it just something lit up in me.
That's
And I
awesome.
asked her, and I said, how long have you been dealing with this? And she said, for over 30 years, right?
Oh.
So she done the Susie Orman, she had done the Dave Ramsey, she had done a
Yeah.
lot of educating herself, right,
Hmm.
about finances. But because nobody was talking about the nervous system,
Hmm.
she had been stuck. So I feel like those of us who get to do this work really are helping to support people in bridging a gap and taking away some of the shame and blame that we get in dominant culture, to a much more compassionate and holistic approach.
Oof. So it was well received.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That
Yeah.
is my dream. I mean, my dream really is to help finance professionals see the importance of the healing arts and adding it to their work. So let's just manifest it outwards. I would love, love, love the opportunity to do that, especially that I've had a lot of success with CPAs and accountants myself as when they were my clients. Um, okay, so let's say I'm a higher achiever, whether I'm a CPA, whether I'm a lawyer, whatever I am, okay? And I want to get better with money, and then I go and read the Dave Ramseys and the Suze Ormans and all that stuff, and I'm still not getting it right. Okay. Instead, I'm adding shame. Well, insult to injury. Like I'm adding shame to something that's not working. So, what happens in our bodies, in our nervous system, when we feel stressed and anxious and overwhelmed with money, and then we add shame to that?
I love it. Yeah, it's like Miracle Grow. It's like Miracle Grow, right?
Hmm.
Shame is like
Hmm.
Miracle Grow to
It
any
is. Oh,
financial problems or disorders we have. You know what Miracle Grow is,
I
right?
know. I know that.
Okay,
I
okay.
know that American
Okay,
thing.
okay,
Yes.
just checking. I just want to make sure. So, the way I think about it is that when we go into shame, kind of from a nervous system perspective, right? We are in a freeze response,
Hmm.
right? We are in a freeze response where we are not doing our best thinking.
Absolutely not.
We are in survival mode 100%. And so, in order to be able to look at our money, to be able to make changes in our money, to be able to negotiate around money, to be able to negotiate our rates, to be able to negotiate with our clients, with our bosses, we need to be reasonably well regulated. We need to be in that kind of smooth part of the nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of the nervous system, right? Where
Hmm.
where there's like we feel some aliveness, maybe if we've been dancing, in honor of my friend Efu, if we've been dancing, we feel some aliveness in our system. But we can also afterwards, we can take a nap and rest afterwards, right?
Hmm.
If our nervous system is not in that situation and we look at our money, very depending on what our experiences have been, and we go and we freeze, there that is an overcoupling with shame in the nervous system. So freeze and shame kind of go together, and very often what happens is collapse, and that's where we see a lot of avoidance behavior. So people will ask me, you know how do I, tell me, like, how do I know if this is a problem for me, right? And I will
Hmm.
say, well, when you open up your 401k and you look at it, do you have difficulty breathing, right? Do you not want to open your bills, right? If you have a pile of bills in the corner that you don't want to open, that you're avoiding, that might be a sign that there's some nervous system dysregulation going on, right? It might just mean that you're busy, right? But very often, for many of the folks that I see, it can be a sign of like, oh, this causes too much stress to my nervous system to look at it, so I'm going
Hmm.
to avoid it, which therefore causes the stress to become bigger. And so what happens is like this spiraling effect of like, I don't look at it, so the problem gets bigger. And because the problem is bigger, I don't look at it. So we have a
Yeah.
vicious circle.
Yeah. I have a different response to financial stress. I go into fight mode.
Mm.
So I from when I got sick last year, I'm still paying a medical bill and I need to pay at the beginning of the month, I'm paying it in installments. Today is the first of the month. I woke up at 6 to pay it. And I'm like, they're not open yet. And I waited and I waited. And I'm like, okay, 7:30, they're open. Called them, paid it. I'm like, yeah, done. That
Yeah.
was not fun. Like I was watching myself doing this. I knew I was in a fight response and I knew that I could calm myself down, but I let myself be in fight response because I couldn't be in fight response last year.
That's
So
right.
I let myself be in it. And it was a very discerning moment for me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this regulated. I want to do this angry. It felt good to do this angry.
I love that you're saying that. It's so funny, since you mentioned Palm Springs Somatics, which is my in-person
Hmm.
practice. Our tagline is embody your power,
Uh-huh.
right? Because so often I see folks doing nervous system regulation, and their goal is to kind of be like in this permanent state of Zen and
No.
nirvana. And it's like, yeah, no, like you and I are from the same part of the world. Like we're Mediterranean. We're like, sometimes you have to fuck shit up. Like
Hmm.
you need to fight back. And I wish everybody listening to this podcast was like recognizes, like in the United States, like you can go to, if you have a medical emergency, you can go to the office, and they are legally required. There are legal protections required that they have to work with you
Hmm.
if you are unable to pay.
Hmm.
So the shame doesn't go on. So, from the lens that I come from, capitalism is always trying to put the shame on the individual.
Yes.
And what the more nervous system regulation that I see in my clients and in myself, the more capacity we have to put the problem where it belongs, which is on
Yes.
systems that are not designed for people's well-being.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to fight.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, you know what? You want to be you want to be angry in fight mode? Be. Because it needed to be. And I don't know. Every time I call them, I'm like, what's my balance? And they give me a different number. And well, I want to fight back. And it's not a pleasant thing. And I'm gonna just give my nervous system the opportunity to express whatever. I'm not gonna suppress it. Fuck
That's right. I
that. I
I
don't
love that you're
teach that.
saying that. I love that you're saying this. I know you have a global audience of listeners, and so maybe people will appreciate this. But I recently got World Cup tickets, and I'm going to
Uh-huh.
get to go to a World Cup game in person, which I've never
Jordan's
done
gonna
before.
win.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course it is.
I
I
hope so.
won't tell you who I'm going to see, but I'm going in California, and I was, really fortunate to be able to get some tickets. And, the ticket prices were insane. They're really, really, it's a really crazy, extravagant thing. And after I got the ticket, there's like this whole thing on their website, and I had to go in and like transfer the ticket to myself
Mhm.
from where I'd purchased it. And the user interface was so bad. I literally was on this user interface for like 25 minutes to just get access to the ticket that I had already purchased
Really?
and had
World
spent a
Cup?
fortune on. And I had my own fight response. Let me tell you,
Mhm.
my own fight response was like, you can instantly take my money,
Mm.
but you cannot instantly give me back what I need. And so I
Oh.
had my own fight response, and I revel in that, right? Because it
Mhm.
tells me I'm still alive,
I'm
and
still alive
I am still alive, and I will continue to embody my power and continue to support people in embodying theirs when it is appropriate.
when it is appropriate. Yeah, like this morning, it felt appropriate to be angry, and I reveled in it. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna be
I love
angry.
it.
So going, it's kind of in the same topic. You, can financial stress be experienced as trauma? And I know that the word trauma is so overused now. Oh, this traumatized me. This traumatized me. How can someone tell the difference between actual financial trauma versus just financial stress?
Yeah, that's a lovely, lovely question. And I tend to think of them on a continuum.
Hmm.
I tend to think of, so the way I put it is that the effects of stress are cumulative.
Hmm.
Right? If you have enough small stressors, that can equal a little t trauma. And if
Yeah.
you have enough little t traumas, that can equal a big T trauma.
Hmm.
So we're talking about the cumulative effect of stress on the nervous system. And let's be really, really clear. Like, we are designed to be able to have stress. Like, we're
Yeah.
designed to be able to cope with stress. And I feel like this is important to say, particularly for younger listeners. I have experienced, I'm Gen X. And so I am like just thrilled when I see people who are, Gen Z in particular, like they understand their nervous system so well. They understand their language and their emotions, and they understand that so well. And they really have like so much awareness. What I see happening very frequently is that they recognize the stress, they recognize the trauma, but they don't have the capacity or tools or knowing or support to transform it into mobilization, because
Hmm.
otherwise we just become immobilized,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I feel like that's meaningful to say, because very, very frequently we get stuck into these patterns of using the terminology without recognizing that the terminology is like, there's a Buddhist saying that is this idea of like pointing at the moon,
Hmm.
right? Pointing at the moon isn't the same thing as the moon, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I feel like a lot of time, right? It's like you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Pointing at the moon is not the same experience as beholding the moon or the
Yeah.
moon. And so I feel like very frequently there are people who maybe watch Instagram and they hear from influencers like, "Oh, I can shake my hips and I can release trauma," and I'm like, let's talk about that. Well, let's talk about that. But I think it's important to be in this context of like having compassion and empathy for where people are coming from,
Yeah.
where if you're getting your education, most people don't watch the nightly news. Most people don't read newspapers. Most people don't read books anymore. So most people in our culture are getting their information from 30, 60, and 90-second, reels on Instagram. So given that, right, I don't blame people for misusing terms like stress and trauma. So the way I understand it is that trauma is anything that overwhelms our capacity to cope or respond and leaves us feeling helpless or hopeless.
Hmm.
Right. That differs depending on the nervous system that it takes place in. So if let's say you and I are hiking here in Palm Springs and
Let's do it.
let's do it, exactly. And we hear the sound of a rattlesnake, right? Each of our nervous systems is going to have a different response depending on our previous lived experiences, depending on what's already in our nervous system, right?
Yeah.
If I have been attacked by a rattlesnake when I was 3 years old and I was horribly disfigured, I'm going to have a different response than you will, who's never come into contact with a with a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's important. And when we talk about money, so people might be thinking of that example. That's a pretty clear example.
Hmm.
Same thing with money, right?
Hmm.
So if you are somebody who, if you and I are colleagues and you've never been fired from a job before, right? You grew up, you had stable housing when you were growing up, you had proximity to healthcare and education, and all your needs were met. You were raised in a two-parent family that didn't have any intergenerational trauma, and you lose your first job at 35, but your folks say, hey, you can come back in and move in with us, right? The
Or just I believe in you, you'll be okay. Just that
Correct.
sentence,
Just,
right?
I believe in you, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
The response you're going to have is going to be a very different nervous system response to somebody who perhaps was raised by a single parent who was living on government assistance, who didn't
Hmm.
have proximity to financial resources, who was maybe
Hmm.
facing homophobia at the time, right? Maybe they were also facing racism at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Their nervous system has been exposed to a different level of stressors, so that when they lose that job at 35, the response is going to be very, very different in
Yes.
terms of the impact that it has. And I feel like that intersectional lens is such an important part of the conversation that I want more and more people who are mental health practitioners to have, people who are in the coaching space to have, and finance professionals as well to
Definitely.
have, so that
Hmm.
we can better serve people.
Definitely. So whether we have financial trauma or we have money stress, our nervous system is going to go into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. That's just a given. It's not a flaw. It's not a design flaw. This is just what we do when we feel triggered or threatened. And since getting sick and since dealing with all of that, even though I know better, I just published an episode last week called My Dirty Little Money Secret. And it was that I have been self soothing through shopping,
Yeah.
just buying little trinkets, buying little things. And again, like, the awareness is important. And sometimes I let myself go because I have a financial system that allows for, little, what do you call, splurges here and there. But also I know it's because I spent a year in complete health uncertainty and complete fear. And I'm doing it to soothe myself. Like when I was with my parents in Jordan, I didn't shop. I swear. Like my mom was like, Nadine, do you want to buy this? No, I don't need to. But ever since being here and being away from my family, I don't have as much support. I do have a lot of support, but not as much support. So I can identify that my emotional spending or my overspending is kind of like a way for me to mobilize my freeze response in a way. But let's talk about like what how could fight, flight, freeze, fawn manifest financially?
Yeah. I love that question so much, and I want to put a pin in that question because there's
Hmm.
another question before we answer that that we need to answer that I feel is really important. And you just beautifully described it. Like you just beautifully described it, and it's really, really important. So, I notice you have the book, Polyvagal Theory, on your shelf. And, polyvagal theory is just this idea of how we respond to difficult circumstances.
Hmm.
But the very first thing that Stephen Porges discovers in polyvagal theory is that our first response, our actual first response to a stressful situation is actually social engagement.
Hmm.
When our nervous system has gotten the support it has needed to develop properly, our first response is actually, if there's a difficulty, it's to look to, hey, who can I collaborate with around this? Who can I look to for support, right? In the absence of the opportunity for healthy social engagement, that's when we go into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Hmm.
And so you just described it beautifully, right? So when you were in the presence of your folks and you were receiving that social engagement on a
Hmm.
much more consistent basis, your nervous system was, much more regulated and you had more capacity to tolerate the ups and downs, right? You take away that social engagement support and then those kind of survival responses kind of kick in. And I feel it's really important for us to name that because this goes back to one of the favorite things that capitalism and technology wants to do with us, which is to isolate us, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
right now there are people listening to this podcast by themselves, right? Those people, you people listening to us, you could be having a conversation. You could call Nadine, you could call me, you could call a friend. You could be having a conversation with an actual person to talk to somebody about what's going on. It's great that you're engaging by listening. That is a
Hmm.
wonderful first step, and I'm really, really excited about. Better to listen to this than the Real Housewives of God knows what hellscape, right? So I'm excited that people are listening to us. And what I know is that consuming content is not the same as social engagement. And I really, really, really want people to hear that. It's not a way to shame or blame anyone. It's a way to invite folks into curiosity of like what some of us have to do, some of us who have really sort of sensitive nervous systems, is say, okay, I know engaging socially is also taxing on my system, right? There's
Yeah.
also a demand depending on what kind of experiences that you've had. So, how can I do it in a way that is going to feel good, right? Can I reach out? Can I text a friend and tell them, hey, I'm listening to this great podcast you should listen to, right? I'm listening to Nadine Zumat's wonderful podcast, Unfuck Your Money, you should listen to. Can I send them an email saying, hey, this is something I'm getting to know, right? Can I send them a voice note? I want to really say that because it's important for people to have really practical tools to start slowly with the work.
Hmm.
Now back to your first question.
Yes. That what you just said was actually my next question, but that's perfect. So let's
I
go
love
back
it.
to that and do the Mediterranean thing of jumping from one
I love it.
conversation
I
to the
love it.
other.
Let's dance. Let's dance, baby. I love it. I love it. So, how does fight, flight, freeze, and fawn show up in our money relationship? Well, we might fight with our partners.
Mhm.
Right? Our partners might say, I think it's a great idea to spend, $1,000 to, buy this new pair of shoes. And we might say, I think that's crazy. And I would much rather spend that money to go away for a weekend, right?
Just that hypothetical example made my
Just that
face
hypothetical
twitch. Like
example.
I'm like, no,
Exactly.
he's not.
Right, right, exactly, right. So there might be a fight. You might see it. The most obvious place people see it is in interpersonal relationships and family, right?
Mhm.
Your kid says, "Hey, I need the latest iPhone," and I'm like, I mean, I don't have children, so I don't want to speak to that particular topic, but I have lots of opinions. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to hear them. If your kid's asking for the latest iPhone, like please have them call me because I will give them a talking to, I promise. Anyway, close that parenthesis. No, I'm joking.
No, I'm
So
not.
that's how the fight response might show up in the family.
Mhm.
how does the freeze response might show up that let's say you get hired and you're starting a new collaboration with an organization and you agree that in 90 days that you're going to do a review, right? And let's say you take a lower salary than you want, right? Because you really want to get your foot in the door, and so you take a lower salary than you want, but you manage to be working with a great coach at the time, and so you say to them, okay, I'll take the salary, but I'd like a review in 90 days. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, okay, let's do it. But by the time the 90 days rolls around, you're like, I can't bring it up. I can't bring
Mm-hmm.
it up. I'm too
Mm-hmm.
scared, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're in your freeze response. You're like
Mm-hmm.
collapsed. You can't do it. So you have the conversation and you don't even mention, right?
Got
Wanting,
it. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's another way that freeze shows up. A flight. One of the ways I most commonly see flight show up is around retirement planning, right? Like, the whole concept of retirement is so funny. I don't even think it's a thing anymore, right? I think there's a book. I think I have I know somebody who wrote a book like about like the phantom of retirement, like because that's not even going to be for so many of us. That's not even going to be a thing. And I love my work, so that's fine for me.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting concept, like this whole you know, post-war kind of concept of, some particular version of, you get your gold watch at 65, which doesn't exist for the vast, majority of humanity. But has kind of been hauled up as a gold standard,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people go through that and feel so much shame because they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they haven't saved, $8 million or however many millions of dollars
Mm-hmm.
people think that they need to save for retirement. So a flight response comes up when your accountant says, hey, can we look at, let's look at your money. Or when your financial planner says, hey, let's look at your money. Or when somebody says to you, do you have an accountant or a financial planner? And you're like, no, I don't want to do that, right? That's your flight response as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the fawn response is I see most commonly, I work with a lot of communities of color. I work with a lot of first generation folks, a lot of first generation wealth holders. And, a lot of us who are shapeshifters, right? And who really know how to adapt. You and I have lived in multiple countries, multiple continents. We know how to adapt, and which is really wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside of that can be that we might fall into very frequently into a fawn response, which might look like someone saying, "Hey, I know that your coaching packages, cost $5,000, but I'm really having a hard time, and I need a new car, and I'm wondering if you could do it for three."
Mm-hmm.
And you say, "Sure," even though that's not good for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this need to people please. There's this need to maintain, a certain kind of self concept. There's this certain right. There's this kind of behavior that even though your coaching program is valued at 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever it is. Your nervous system goes into a habitual survival response,
Uh-huh.
which is of placating other people,
Placating. Yeah.
particularly those who you perceive as having more power than you do. So that's
Exactly.
some of the ways it might show up.
Yeah, a lot of times people view their clients as they hold the power to their well-being, as practitioners or coaches. And I sometimes like recently I actually lowered my prices because I wanted to, because it felt good to do so. Because I know everybody, I mean, we are dealing with money and I know everybody is kind of in, $10 now. Doesn't feel like it did, I don't know, a few months ago. But that felt good. I never did it from a place of phoning. I did it and I was very excited when I did it. And so many people renewed and so many people thanked me. And that felt different because I am very aware of what phoning looks like and people pleasing and lowering prices. And I teach about it. And I even, when I sent an email out to people, I was like, I know we talked about this, but here is my thought process. I wanted to have a teaching moment in what I did for previous clients, just to kind of be discerning of when we need to do that and when we don't. So that was
And what I love
excellent.
about that, Nadine, it's like that's where being attuned to yourself somatically is really, really valuable. I love that when we can attune to ourselves and we can know what's happening in our bodies when we respond to a different number, we can communicate so much more
Yeah.
clearly, and it comes with such a different authority. I'm really, really honored that for the first time ever, the Somatic Experiencing Institute is going to be offering a program called the Somatic Side of Money Trauma that
And
I've
you're
been
teaching
asked.
it, and I'm so excited. I'm
I'm
so
so
excited.
excited about it. It'll be, this October, and it's really meant to dive exactly into what you're talking about right now of like gutting underneath the number, because the number can be rational, right? Their
Mhm.
numbers might make sense. Like there's lots of ways, like there, think about the number 10. How many different ways are there to add up to the number 10? There's a lot of different ways, right?
Mhm.
It's the emotional response that we have, or the nervous system response that we have to that, that is what the challenging piece is. And so when we get to know how our nervous system is responding to something, we can come at it from a place of feeling grounded and abundant, which is where we can best, take care of our own family's needs as
Yeah,
well as better serve our clients. So I'm really excited about that program starting in October. It's
me
just,
too.
4 sessions, but it's designed for anybody who's, if you're a coach, if you're a mental health practitioner, if you are a finance professional and you're like, oh, I get it, that I could better help my clients if I knew more about this stuff. Or even if you're just like a regular person who's like, I need help in my relationship with money, it's going to be a really meaningful opportunity to do something kind of historic, which I'm really proud of. It's been a vision of mine for years to do this kind of work on this field, and I feel very, very humbled and proud of this opportunity to share this
Yeah.
work.
I was very excited. I mean, I was reading the email and I was like, I hope it's Felina. I hope it's Felina. And then I saw your picture. Where was I? I was somewhere in the house and I started screaming. My husband like, what's going on? Don't worry, don't worry about it. So that's, I was like, I need to reach out to you so that we can talk more about this so more people can enroll. And I'm definitely going to be linking it and joining. Mind you, I'll be there. Because it's such an exciting opportunity that finally SE is talking money. And that's just really refreshing.
And I just want to add, Nadine, it's so, for folks who are not in this like little niche world that we're in, right? Like, why is it significant? So if we just take a zoom, like if we zoom out and we look at the mainstream conversations people are having about money,
Hmm.
mainstream conversations people are having about money are, stop buying the lattes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe people have finally gotten over that, stop buying the lattes.
Yes, we're
But
over lattes and avocado and toast
we're
problems. Yeah.
still, but it's still around in a lot of
Hmm.
communities, in a lot of, mainstream finance. There's still a lot of that, blaming, people for their experience. And when at the same time, those are the people who have been the most compulsively marketed to, it's like, I always find it fascinating. I don't really use credit cards. I have one that I use that I've had since I was in college because for various reasons. And it's so interesting. Whenever ever I log into that website, they're like, "Do you want a loan? You've been approved. You get this, you get that." I'm like, people, I just need to like, I just want to make sure I have I take care of my balance. Like, I don't want to buy more of your crap. So
Only
it's
in
interesting,
America, though. Only in
precisely.
America.
So here's
Yeah.
the thing, Nadine, that's so interesting about that. The same people who, from on one side of their mouth, the same institutions and these large financial institutions that are telling us that it's our fault that we
Uh-huh.
don't make more money, or that we need to pay 24% interest rates for credit cards, which is absolute insanity, are the ones who are constantly and compulsively marketing to us to buy more products and services.
Yeah.
And so we have to be discerning. We really have to practice some discernment in terms of like, what are the messages that we are receiving from the culture, and where does our own common sense live? I love our friend Zohan Mamdani in New York, who is just talking about common sense, right? We need to talk about common sense. Rent's too expensive,
Yeah.
you
That's
know?
one of the reasons why why I hesitated about relaunching the podcast is that things look different right now. It's again not a latte and an avocado and toast problem anymore. It's that I bought a house and I'm paying around 7% interest rate and mortgage. Like everything I make is going towards interest. How is that fair?
Yeah.
And I know I'm not the only one. And people, I have a client that's paying like 29% on her Amex. What the hell? Like something like it's not an individual problem, right? It is more of a systemic problem. It always has been, but now more than ever. It doesn't remove our own responsibility from kind of, but it's not all our fault.
I love that you're saying that. And it really, it reminds me of something that I used to hear a long time ago from a professor at Harvard who would talk about like, people would talk about race and class. Like you need to be
Mm-hmm.
able to juggle two balls in the air at the same time. You need to be able to think about race and you need to think about class, right?
Yeah.
Like people are intelligent enough to be able to hold two balls in the air at the same time. I feel it's the same way when we're talking about money work. We both need to be able to hold on the lens of the nervous system and of individual responsibility,
Yeah.
right? For responding to the conditions that we're in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I am not responsible for the conditions that created me, and yet I am responsible for what I do with those conditions, right? So there's
Yeah.
100% responsibility on the one hand,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other hand, there's a 100% awareness of the systems that we're in and who those systems are designed to support, right? As we have seen wealth inequality absolutely skyrocket over the last 15 years in
Crazy.
particular. What I think is actually positive about that, and I will tell you, I think that there is a silver lining about that. It is the following. It is when you have people who are making $250,000 a year increasingly experiencing housing insecurity and scarcity
Now they're seeing it.
because of Scott, they are hopefully going to start understanding and allying with working and middle class folks,
Yes.
right? And the poor in terms of lobbying and allying and creating allyship for creating systems that better meet everybody's needs. So I
Yeah.
think that's a silver lining of the skyrocketing inequality.
I'm glad you said that because my blood boils a lot when I think about these things, I just get so freaking I just want to do something about it. And I notice and I know and I'm aware that I want to save the world complex. Like I'm gonna do it all. But just going back to what you said, there's in money archetypes in that I learned through Deborah Price in the Money Coaching Institute. It's like the seesaw between being a victim and a tyrant. You can either be a victim of your own circumstances or you can be a tyrant to yourself and be an asshole to yourself and just be like, that's my problem, that's my fault. So it's about the balance of like, yeah, we're in really weird, shitty, crazy circumstances and I need to take responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I can chew bubble gum and walk at the same time, right? Like I gotta be able to do both, I
Yeah.
have to be able to do both. And there are always going to be some people who would err on the side of one or the other. Like, and I have flip-flopped, like I have
Hmm.
gone from one
Oh,
extreme to
same.
the other,
Hmm.
right? And so I think though that I think it's meaningful and important that for those of us who are particularly holding space for others, but also in our own money journey, to be able to hold both of those at the same time.
There is, now that we talked about, the mainstream finances, there is a couple of questions that I want to bring up for us to discuss if you have time. Yeah, just a couple more. The first thing is, yes, we have seen all the financial stuff on Instagram, but also there has been a rise in you don't have a money problem, you have a nervous system problem kind of folks. All you need to do is have a regulated nervous system. And I know it sounds shiny and lovely, and I know it's so addictive to be in regulation and that zestiness of life. Everything feels possible. But what nobody is talking about, and I actually created a whole episode about it last month, is about capacity. We need to understand the nuance of respecting our nervous system capacity. It's not about I am a regulated or dysregulated with money. There's not that. It's about what you have capacity for in your nervous system right now. How do you increase your capacity? What's your take on that? Like, what is your take on nervous system capacity, how it relates to earning, holding, and managing money?
Yeah, I love that. I really find that's a really meaningful question. So imagine that there are three concentric circles.
Mm-hmm.
The first circle is your comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in that circle is inside a second circle, and that is
Mm-hmm.
the growth circle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then beyond that is a third circle, and that is the overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in our comfort zone, we are not growing.
No.
Right? So that might mean, I have my fixed salary and I'm staying in the same house and I'm staying in the same job and things are I'm in a comfortable place.
Yeah.
But say if I want to grow, right? Maybe I want to develop a side hustle, or maybe I want to expand into other revenue streams. Like I've been doing a lot more public speaking and I absolutely
Mm-hmm.
love it recently.
You're so good at it. Like, I want to be you when I grow up so badly. Like, I was thinking, can I move to Palm Springs just to be around you? Like, that is how much you inspire me.
I would love that so much. I would love that we could go hiking, but not with the rattlesnakes.
No, no rattlesnakes. They don't rattle me anyway.
I love it. I love it. So I'm thinking of like we move, we're when we're in this comfort zone, like we're all kind of flat. But if we want to grow, that means some challenge to our nervous system. That is a
Mhm,
little bit of stress to our nervous system being in the growth zone. That's saying
mhm,
I want more, right? You want to, do this next level training that you're going to do. You want to hire an assistant. I'm
mhm,
looking to grow my business. I'm looking to hire an assistant right now. If you know anybody, let me know. And that's the growth zone. And then beyond the growth zone is the overwhelm zone, right? Which is if we push too much, we go into overwhelm, right? Which is to say we're doing too much. We've exceeded our capacity to be
mhm,
present.
mhm,
So when I think about capacity, there are a lot of things that impact our capacity to be with difficult experiences.
mhm.
Lots of folks. Proximity to internal resources and proximity to external resources,
Yes.
right?
Mhm,
That's really, really, really crucial. So when I see the influencers talking about nervous system regulation, like you should always be regulated. Yeah, in a way, like that is a goal of always being regulated. And in these bodies, I don't think that's realistic. What is realistic is to have enough awareness of your own somatic experience to know, am I in my comfort zone which is to say, where things are just kind of cool and chill and nothing much is happening and things are okay? Am I in my growth zone of my nervous system where I'm learning a new modality and I'm writing a
mhm,
book and I'm hiring, staff and I'm doing this other thing? Or have I pushed myself so much that I am in overwhelm?
mhm,
And this is important because capacity, one of the things that I don't often hear mentioned about capacity is that capacity is related to our capacity to be present.
mhm, mhm.
If we are dissociated, if I am doing, sending out 20 emails, a day to my mailing list or doing, 100 reels on Instagram, right? Which I never do. You'll never see me doing that. But let's just say, and I am completely dissociated and not feeling what's happening in my body, my nervous system is going to be differently impacted than if I am present to what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I want to be present to my life. I want to be present to the people around me. I want to be present to the abundance that I have been bestowed with for today, right? Because I don't know how long I will have it. And I know that there have been generations and generations before me that did not have those opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So I want to honor them by taking like my time to notice, wow, like all of my needs are met. Wow, I have everything I need in this moment. Wow, I actually have more than I need in this moment. It wasn't always that way, right? So capacity doesn't just mean um like it's not just like this hard metric of a number, right? I
Mhm,
feel like when we get into the language and when we talk about the science of the nervous system, we can so easily veer off into this language of metrics.
mm,
But this is also where like a lens, like almost a spiritual lens needs to come into the frame and into the picture, which is to say, do I have the ability to be connected with reality? with what is
Mm-hmm.
actually happening in the world in this moment, in my nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are constantly overriding our capacity, we're not going to feel connected. If we are not challenging ourselves, I also want to speak to, I know there's some folks who are listening to this who are super overwhelmed and they're listening to this because they're looking for some relief. And I hear you and I feel you. And I know that Nadine and I and so many other good people are out there in the world doing what we can to offer resources to meet you where you are, just so you know that you're not alone. But there are also people listening for whom, like, they have stable shelter, they have a car,
Mm-hmm.
they have maybe they're able-bodied, maybe they don't recognize they have access to running water and electricity, and maybe they haven't considered the fact that compared to the vast majority of humanity, they actually have a lot of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that in a shaming or blaming way. I say it in a way of it's this opportunity for reverencing life,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is a term that Efu used to talk about a lot, which is like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
reverence life? How do we reverence those who came before? How do we express our reverencing for life? Which I feel is an important part of the conversation as well.
That does feel very important. Just reverencing life. Kind of, it's making me emotional just thinking about that. And yeah, I can go on a tangent with that. But also, like, just going back to your three concentric circles. Let's say that your comfort zone is that you avoid your bills, and your growth zone is that you're paying your bills consistently. But if you try to if you try to do it all at once, it might swing you into the overwhelm zone. That's one of the things also that I need to kind of warn people about, is that it's not all about having a regulated nervous system. It's that your capacity is going to change from day to day, like you said, but also we need to you need to honor where you're at. Just because you're a financial avoider now, it doesn't mean that you need to willpower, discipline, shame yourself into not becoming one. You need to work very slowly because you don't want to go into that overwhelm window, because that's not good for anyone, being in that overwhelm.
And what happens, and I love that you're saying that, Nadine, because what happens if we do go into that overwhelm, we just collapse again.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with folks who also work with psychedelics, and I do a lot of integration work with folks
Hmm.
who might have really profound, meaningful experiences using psychedelics. And they have these altered states of consciousness where they
Hmm.
feel connected to everything, they feel expansive, they're connected to the one. But if there is no underlying physiological architecture
Hmm.
and ego structure to hold that, we collapse
We
once again,
collapse.
right?
Yeah.
So we might have this huge expansion and then we collapse again. So I feel like with this work, I'm always encouraging my clients when I work with folks individually through my coaching practice and through my SE work is to practice the principles of titration here, right? Just
Hmm.
like it's a term that we talk a lot about in some and trauma healing work. But for laymen, for folks who are like, okay, I'm not an expert in this, I don't know what the hell you people are talking about.
What's a
Think about it this
titration?
way, right? If you go into the gym and you've never gotten off the couch and you're like, hey, I'm going to run a marathon, right? And your first day you try to run 10 miles, you're probably going to
Gotta
set
get
yourself
injured.
up to you're going to probably get injured, you're going to feel exhausted, you're going to hurt yourself, and you're probably not going to get back to the gym the next day.
You won't enjoy it either.
You will not enjoy it, right? Whereas if you're like, okay, next year I want to run a marathon. Okay, it's June, 2026, and I want to do it in June 27. What do I need to get ready? And you reverse engineer something and you look at, okay, that means this week I'm going to get to the gym and I'm going to do 3 workouts a week for 20 minutes each, right?
Hmm.
And you sustain that. Where the reason I think that folks flip flop and they go into what we often call exertion exhaustion
Hmm.
mode is because we don't have enough support. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of shame in this culture about reaching out for support. So when I work with clients individually, so much of what we're doing is I'm holding in my nervous system where they were 3 months ago.
Hmm.
They might not remember, But I
Yeah.
remember in my nervous system, and I get to remind them, hey, do you
Yeah.
remember when you weren't like able to actually open an IRA? Remember when you were so scared to even get on a Vanguard website and you couldn't even open an IRA? Like, I know that because that, that person was me. Like, I was so scared, I didn't want to do it,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But if you don't have accountability and you don't have a loving, compassionate witness to see you making those changes, you can easily push yourself beyond and go into your overwhelm mode. And so
Mhm.
I think that um, that is where getting accountability and support. And it doesn't matter, it could be a coach, it could be your therapist, it could be your neighbor. Like, I don't care who it is. It could
Yeah.
be, your mom, probably not your mom, but it could be somebody else who's on like a journey of transformation. But to have that accountability and support, that is the medicine that keeps us in the work for the long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing it alone is just replicating more of these systems of dominant culture, of pulling ourselves up by
Individualism.
our bootstraps and individualism. And we know that this doesn't work.
No.
So I would rather see somebody say to me, hey, Felina, I can't, I want to make some changes and I'm too overwhelmed. Like, I can't do this like whole, 3-month immersion program you have, or this weekend intensive of, this embodied money trauma reset program. Like, that's too much for me right now. Like, I can't do that. That scares me way too much. I'll say, great. What can you do? Can
Mhm.
you read a book? I have this whole reading list that I give folks. Can you read a book and see if that helps you feel more comfortable with the topic? Can you listen to a podcast, and I recommend your podcast. Can you spend 10 minutes a day writing about why you would like to increase your income and then celebrate afterwards? Or can you spend 10 minutes a day looking at your money, right?
Mhm.
We start really, really, really small, and then we celebrate it with another person so that we get motivated to continue with the process.
And that answers my last question, which is like, if someone listening realizes or recognizes that they have financial trauma, this is the first step. I would say this is the first step. Just reach out to someone that you're comfortable with and don't do it alone, and just titrate or like break down your goals into things that are 90% achievable. Why? Because that recalibrates your nervous system from I can't and I won't to I can. So 90% achievable goals are actually creating a disconfirming experience to your nervous system, which is also healing. And that is something that I love doing, just breaking down big goals into very small steps. And that's how you know, I recovered. That's why how I learned how to walk again, to be honest. Like, just as much as it killed me, I just wanted to run straight away, but I couldn't. I had to break it down, and I had a physical therapist at the time who understood coaching, who understood the actual, like, it was really kind of like ironic that I had a nervous system injury. Can't stop laughing at this. Like, out of all the things that went out of whack, I literally had a peripheral nervous system injury. Like, why? Why, God? Like, why? How funny is that? It wasn't funny at the time. But like, just understanding how the physiology of nervous system works, and that is how I achieve things, by creating 90% achievable goals. That's how I literally healed physical trauma. So we can actually heal financial trauma this way. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I really want to uplift that, how, this is different from a lot of approaches. We live in a culture of like, you can do things not just fast, but faster than anybody else, right? And the AI is spoiling people. I know I keep talking about AI during our conversation today because I have talked to so many people who are overwhelmed by this transition. Like, we are going through a once in a generation kind of transition that is impacting all of us in different ways. And I've had so many people reach out to me who are like, I learn how to use one system at work, and then they change it and they tell me I have to do another system. And like, just I just had this conversation a little while ago. And so, we're all in this space together, right? We're differently impacted, right? It's like, there's the storm, there's the storm of, is as big to everybody, but impacts us all differently because we're in
Yeah.
different sized boats,
Mhm.
and so the moment that we're in requires knowing how big is your boat, right? How much can you do? And also in having the humility, right, of like recognizing that I want to be stable. I want to do this work well for the long haul. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we have lost too many beautiful people way, way, way too early. And I want to be an old ass woman doing this. So I have to go at a pace that my nervous system, you know, works with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep,
And I hope,
same.
and I hope that those of the old souls who are listening feel the same way.
Yeah, old souls, and not just that, people whose bodies aren't what they used to be, you know?
And
We honor
nobody's
that.
is.
No, nobody's is, right? Nobody's is. And it's amazing how, like, just now, I'm not what I used to be, and it's hard. It's hard, but you know, I'm honoring it, and I start SE in a couple of days. Oh, well, thank you so much, Felina. Thank you so much. I wish I could just reach through the screen and give you a hug. I really want to spend in-person time with you, and
Let's do it.
I would love that.
Let's do
Just
it. You're not that far. You're
I'm
just on the other
not,
side of the
right? I
desert. Let's make a
am.
plan.
You just fill me up with so much love and appreciation and inspiration. And I know we said that last time, but I want to have you more often on the podcast. You
Let's do
add
it.
such a richness. Like, if we could do like once every 2 months,
Do it. Done. You've
really?
sold. Absolutely.
Okay.
Sold.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'll get it on my calendar. Send me
Okay.
something. I love
Okay.
it.
I will. I
I
will.
love it.
I
I
mean,
love collaborating with you. I love what you're putting out into the world, and it is desperately needed.
you know, it is desperately needed, and it feels really lonely for me to keep talking about things into space. And I love that I can frame my knowledge into questions so that we can go back and forth with
I love
it.
it. I love it.
It makes me feel happy. Anyway, so I'm gonna link your workshop with SE, and we're gonna have you back on in the next few weeks. Anything else you'd like to add before we jump off and you go to your dentist?
Yeah, I know. Wish me luck. No, I'm
Good
so
luck.
excited. I'm so grateful to be able to do that.
Me too,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I just want to share with folks that the easiest way to register for the class is actually to go to my website.
Your
There's a
website.
link
Okay.
to it on
Okay.
there's a link to it that's on my website, so that's probably the best place. It's at the that people can register for the class in October.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I just want to say keep supporting people who are doing good work in the world, and let somebody know that they've had an impact on you today. It makes such a difference. And Nadine, you're having an impact on so many people's lives. It's really, really meaningful what you're doing. And I'm excited to continue to partner with folks who want to uplift and support us in these meaningful times of change in our society. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Nadine.
Thank you for tuning into the Unfuck Your Money podcast. If this episode was helpful, I'd love to send you a free gift. Leave a 5-star review and send a screenshot to @Nadine Zumot on Instagram or the link in the show notes, and I'll personally send you my financial freedom starter kit as a thank you. This is a powerful step-by-step resource to create epic abundance and safety with your money. Every review helps me reach more high achievers who desire and deserve financial freedom. So click subscribe and download a few more episodes, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.